Hello, welcome back to this course on modeling and simulation of natural processes. Now we'll start our second module, and second module is dedicated to modeling and simulation, some specific ideas. Why do we need a model? So there are several reasons, but I think first we would like to describe some process, maybe to classify it, but mostly I would say to understand how things work and to be able to predict how a system will evolve and potentially to control it. What is a good model? That's of course a difficult question. We already discussed on the previous model the importance of identifying the right question, but it's also clear that one model is not, for one process there is not only one model. You may have several different models. And I like this quote by Einstein saying that for a good model, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. So you should just capture the right level of what you want to describe, avoid to do too much, but of course don't oversimplify things, because then you will miss what you want. I think it's important to understand that when you do modeling, that nature has several levels of reality, in the sense that according to the scale at which you want to describe a given process, you may use different tools and different methodology. For instance, we know that our world is composed of atoms, of molecules, and if you think of, for instance, the atmosphere, you know that if you want to describe the wind or whatever, you probably don't want to describe this in terms of atoms or molecules. It's too much detailed. So maybe you want to describe this in terms of fluid element, which is already, dividing the atmosphere on small cubes, for instance. And in the end, you probably want to discuss what's the pressure field, what's the wind speed, and so on. So you do it at a higher level than, of course, what makes the air, molecules and things like that. And in the end, you may want to study weather forecast or climatology, and definitely you don't want to predict climate out of a model based on atoms. So again, you should really adapt your model level to the question and the scale at which you want to answer your problem. Another example, in biology, we know that our body is made of cells. Cells made tissues, tissue made organ, and organ make living beings. So again, depending on what you want, you should focus on one of this level. It's probably very difficult to model a full human being just out of the cells it made of. So we are still very, very far from having the computer power for doing that. Same idea in a more another problem. For instance, if you consider traffic of cars, well, you may decide to describe that as a global phenomena, how many cars you have in the town or something like that. But you can also describe in detail the position of each car, but certainly you don't want to go at a lower scale. We know that a car is made of mechanical parts, engine, wheels. That's certainly totally irrelevant to know that if you want to study traffic. So again, even if it's part of the system you describe, it's not part of the question you want to solve. So again, be very careful of what you want to ask and what you should include in your model. And it's not always easy to identify this important ingredient and to identify how this ingredient they mutually interact, and that's where the knowledge of the field is important. So sometimes you have really to collaborate with people who know very well the phenomena you want to describe. And it is our experience that sometimes if you want to simulate a process at a finer scale than the question at which you want to have answer, it's usually a good idea. For instance, if you want to simulate traffic, it's good to go back to the level of the cars and not have a higher level of description. It's usually true in many other problems, and you will see example in this course later on. I would like also to illustrate the fact that for a same system, you can really describe it in many different ways. Depends also on the scale at which you want to describe it. But for instance, take the case of fluids. I mentioned the atmosphere. I can mention a flow in a river or whatever. So you see on this slide, there's an equation, mathematical symbols. It's a partial differential equation known as the Navier-Stokes equation, which is the key equation to describe a flow of a fluid. So it's a very beautiful construct. You should understand in terms of problem-solving methodology that from the phenomena we go to this partial differential equation, PDE, and then most of the time you are totally unable to solve it. It's a too complicated equation for real situation. So then you go to a next stage, which is discretization, so that you have a chance to have a computer solve this equation. So from the PDE, you need techniques, rather sophisticated applied math techniques to discretize this equation to finally get a numerical solution. So that's the standard way of modeling a fluid. But recently there has been a new proposition, and for instance, to create a virtual fluid in your computer. So what do I mean by that? We know that the fluid is made of molecules. So could we just have a model with abstract molecules and abstract interaction between these molecules? So that's what is illustrated on this drawing, where you see actually the main phase of the motion of the molecules. So they will interact together. So that's what we call collision. So just think of them hitting each other, and then due to the collision they will bounce to new direction and move across the space, where they will probably hit new particles and so on and so on. So it's a very abstract way of representing a fluid, but it turns out that it's a good way, and we will learn more about that later in this course, because you put some very important ingredient in this model, which is mass conservation and momentum conservation. And the equation I showed you before, it's just a mathematical expression also of momentum conservation. So we just express momentum conservation either through a partial differential equation or through a computer model. And this looks interesting because with this approach, in terms of problem-solving methodology, you go directly from the phenomena to a computer model. And so it's arguably simpler. Now, of course, as you should know, there's no model which is always better than another, and again it depends on the question you ask and your resources to solve it. So those are some examples of modeling techniques that are common. So I will just go through them. We have n-body systems, we have molecular dynamics, and you will have a chapter in this class about them. Then you have a very important domain, which is mathematical equation through ordinary differential equation, a partial differential equation. So we'll touch a little bit this field. It of course would deserve a course by itself, as actually all these different methodology. But here we will also just cover the basic idea, so you have an intuition of the different approaches. Then we will also briefly discuss what's known as Monte Carlo method, and spend maybe a bit more time on cellular automata and lattice-Boltzmann. Lattice-Boltzmann is just an example of this picture I showed you before. Okay, so we can go very far with this idea. Then we will have a chapter on multi-agent system, discrete event simulation, and I will briefly mention complex network very soon, but we don't have time to do it. So there are many excellent books and courses on each of these topics, but to our experience there is no document or courses which try to cover all this field at once, and just to insist on the differences and what's the philosophy behind that. So I hope that's we will be able to do it successfully in this class. So once a model is specified, of course, you need to run it on your computer, and you need to study the result. Okay, that's what's called a numerical experiment, and basically you have a kind of a laboratory within your computer which implement a virtual universe out of the model that you define. So to do that, you need not only to understand the phenomena that you're describing, but you need to understand computer, programming, a bit of software engineering, algorithms, data structure, hardware, whether it's parallel computing, GPUs, and so on. You probably need to understand about code optimization, data analysis. So it's a lot of knowledge, and that's all part of this computational science domain I was mentioning. Of course, once you have your program implementing a model, you need to verify. I mean, it's not clear that you didn't make a mistake and you are not, maybe you have implemented something not corresponding to the model you defined. So it's called code verification. But suppose that your code is correct, you are really implementing the model you were expecting. Maybe the model is wrong, so you should test whether your model does it right. And it's one way to do it is to benchmark it on known phenomena for which the result is well known by other method, by theory, and so on. And if you want to apply your model to new processes for which you have no idea of the result, of course you need to have enough understanding of the field to be able to judge whether your result makes sense or not. So this is just an example of a model where you would like to reproduce the deposition and absorption that you can see on the left image, this gray level. So you see little dots, so that's particles that hit the surface and stick to it and form little clusters. And on the right you have an image which is a computer simulation trying to reproduce the same thing. And of course I will not tell you now what's in the model, but just want to show you the result of this model, which is not only the image you see, but also the data which are on the plot on the right. And you see that as a function of time, we measure the number of clusters or aggregate that we see per millimeter square. And you have a continuous line, which is the prediction of the model, and you have the dot, which are the experimental observation. And of course, you're very happy here because you can explain your experimental observation out of the model. Of course, you have many parameters that are suggested on the top of the figures, which shows you that well, you have, of course, to input some knowledge in your model. So with this, I would like to close this second module on modeling and simulation. And the next module will be about space and time. How do we integrate them into a model? So thank you for your attention.